Hideo Kojima is basically a household name at this point. He is a legend. Even people who haven't played his games know who he is. His name doesn't represent his games as much as it represents the impact that he's had on the scope of what video games can accomplish. Kojima Syndrome is what we say a person who is more often than not on the artist positive side of the debate around arbitrating artistic intent has. That is a mouthful. Okay, so what does that mean? Artistic intent is the intention of the artist, funnily enough. The decisions that artists make to convey deeper meanings isn't always obvious. A lack of artistic intent is the opposite of this.
Why does everything stop moving when I'm on the ladder?
It is where parts of the art aren't the result of conscious decision making on the part of the artist. Essentially, some part of the art that has been placed there wasn't placed there on purpose, or maybe it represents something that the artist doesn't intend for it to represent. To arbitrate artistic intent, or to be the arbiter of artistic intent, is to, in the absence of clarification from the artist, declare which parts of art we as consumers believe are the result of an artist's decisions, and to attempt to vocalise certain interpretations of the intentions of these aspects of the art. To be on the artist's side of this debate is to assume that the questioned aspects of the work are conscious decisions made by the artist, or to justify parts of the work that may not have been intentional decisions as if it were a conscious decision made by the creator. Any out-and-out negative aspects of the work should be overlooked as mistakes, and that shouldn't distract from the display of the artist's skill and passion. Of course, the artist's negative side of this debate is to assume the questioned aspects of the work are unintentional. Any merit that these unintentional aspects may have is purely coincidental, that these aspects should be overlooked in criticism as a negative due to the lack of intention behind them, and usually that the artist is not as skilled and as passionate as they would have you believe. The next video that I plan to do is going to be on Death Stranding. Actually, I've got the script written already. Because of this, there are more things that this side of the debate consider out-and-out negative aspects of the work, and that these negative aspects of the work are subject to the harshest of criticism. I am not an art critic or even an academic, but I still have a lot to say on this matter. Part 1, that was the point. Sometimes I scroll through Reddit and I see a meme like this. This is a perfect example of being on the artist's negative end of the debate. A door being closed in a poem about death is just coincidence. It isn't as though a lot of writers choose every word, phrase and symbolism with great attention to detail. As though poems and novels that aren't written by school children aren't works of passion and skill that, while easy to dismiss, are incredibly beneficial to analyse. I'm not here to talk about poetry, I'm here to talk about a couple of jars and some video games. I intend to get all of my feelings around Kojima Syndrome out in the open without mentioning any of Kojima's games. The next part of this video is basically unresearched, but there's oh my god. Ai Weiwei is a Chinese contemporary artist and activist. I grew up in the far northwest of China, where he lived under harsh conditions due to his father's exile. As an activist, he has been openly critical of the Chinese government's stance on democracy and human rights. In 1995, Weiwei created a piece that some people may consider barely art. It's called Dropping a Han Dynasty Urn. It's a triptych, which is art made up of 3 sections. In this case, it's 3 photographs arranged chronologically. The first photo shows the artist on a paved floor with a brick wall in the background, and he's holding the urn. The second photo shows him in the same location. His hands are now apart, and the urn is mid-full. It's quite close to the floor. The third photo shows him in the same location. His hands are in the same place, still apart. The urn is now on the floor, broken into pieces. The photos are black and white. They are not exactly beautiful, and the artist's intentions are completely interpretable. Ignore the bell, that's my cat, if you hear it. Some might pose that this art is ugly and disrespectful. Some may say that the destruction doesn't outweigh the benefits of whatever the message may be, or even that there is no nuance to this so-called art. They may argue that it shows a complete lack of artist intent and is nothing but needless destruction. A sufferer of Kojima Syndrome may pose that that's the point. It's meant to entice emotion regardless of what the emotion is. If you don't know the artist or the context, you can maybe half argue that it can be framed in a way to show that it's a ridiculous man performing a ridiculous act of destruction to show the value of tradition. However, it's more likely that they counter this argument with the art shows a normal-looking man, a bored-looking man, performing an act that's incredibly destructive and disrespectful.
And for somebody to then destroy what is considered a priceless or very valuable urn became an act where the viewer and the artist were complicit in the act.
As a message to authority and consumer alike that he doesn't care about these traditions and maybe they shouldn't either. They could argue that this triptych is an outright condemnation of tradition, because in China the traditions are often seen as less than democratic. Some people may even argue that the piece is pretty. The minimalism in the shot compositions and the location, in the hand movements, in the stoic, stone-faced artist.
There's a really specific gaze in the artist's face that abdicates responsibility. And you feel it when you stand in front of that triptych. You feel responsible. Even in the composition of the art itself, I mean, there could be a fourth photo of regret in the face of such a substantial loss, but there isn't. Every detail of these photographs is meticulous. It could be argued that the photographs are important, like, not just to art, not just to the legacy and impression of the Han Dynasty itself, but to the legacy of the urn. I couldn't find anything on what happened to the urn after the shoot. I assume that it was disposed of instead of kept in a museum. Let me know if I'm wrong. Weiwei actually confessed that this was take 2. So what you're seeing is this Han Dynasty urn, this $1 million urn being destroyed, and that's only half of the destruction that was caused by the creation of this art. That mathematically makes the message of the piece twice as potent. Weiwei is known to have quoted General Mao about this piece of art, saying, "The only way to build a new world is by destroying the old one. I can break down the images, I can try to break down the nuances, I can justify this as art to myself and try to justify it to others, but frankly I don't really care about the work. I literally googled modern art controversies and picked something that I thought was interesting on the first page that I saw. What I value is the artistic intent of the photographs and the artistic merit which they portray. There are people who look at this kind of art and say that it isn't art, it's just mindless destruction, and I find that incredibly offensive. It's like saying a chair isn't a chair because you don't like the design of the upholstery.
A blue canvas with a white line down the middle. A urinal. People running around in a circle with their fingers up each other's butts. This masterpiece. An unmade bed. Yoko Ono screaming like a demented bitch. Modern art, or conceptual art, isn't art at all. It's one big circle jerk of pretentious twats trying to make themselves look sophisticated by ascribing meaning to something that's completely meaningless.
The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is a video game. It's still way ahead of its time. Other games try to copy aspects of this game, like the time system, shitloads of side quests, and having a genuinely living and breathing world, but no games have quite succeeded in these aspects to the extent that Majora's Mask did. It takes place over 3 in-game days. You've got to save the world, but this takes longer than 3 days. Whenever you need more time, you can restart the 3-day cycle and keep key items such as weapons. Everything else resets, so your consumable items, your money, the areas, the character stories, and at the end of the 3rd day the moon crashes and kills everybody. There are a few main story quests that net rewards, but I'd say more than half of the game is side quests. If you consider things like saving the monkey or saving Lulu's eggs as side quests, then the game is mostly side quests. Majora's Mask has a quirky sense of humour and fucking disgusting portrayals of the acceptance of the death of yourself and others by a myriad of well-built characters. Majora's Mask is the inferior sequel to an astounding, groundbreaking video game. If you're a fucking idiot,
Ocarina of Time might have had its own nuances and a huge legacy. That's been discussed by more talented people than myself, but you can cut the nuance in Majora's Mask with a knife. It's malleable. The troubled development is no secret. The game was rushed, it was built with limited assets. There is literally a cutscene in the game that was made to resemble a nightmare that one of the developers had about the development process of this game. Please watch it, I'll put it on now. Despite all of this, you get moments of the game that are like this. This is all nuance. There is a synergy to this game that is obvious even after 20 years. It's far, far, far bigger than the sum of its parts. As a side note, I was actually mulling over not including Majora's Mask in my top 10 games, but I played it again for this video and it's easily in my top 3. It's probably my second favourite game. To talk to Pamela and her dad, who I used in that example, you need to restore the flow of water to Akana. The house that was surrounded by Gyptos starts playing music out of the large speakers on top of the house, and that's powered by the water wheel on the side of the house. When the music starts playing, it's jolly, but it's really creepy when it's juxtaposed against the area that it's in, which is essentially the Valley of Death. When the music starts playing, the Gyptos hear it and they appear to flee from the loud music. A lone young girl, smaller and younger than Link, leaves the house to make her way up to the well for whatever reason, and if she sees you, she'll run back to the house and lock herself inside. You can sneak in the house behind her and check it out. If you go downstairs, there are speakers that are blasting the same jolly music to a box on the far side of the room, and when Link approaches the box, a bizarre creature steps out. It's half man, half Gypto, and it's really, really sad. If Link tries to kill it, we learn that it's the girl's father, and she protects him from the player, condemning them for even thinking of attacking this man. Alternatively, Link can play the Song of Healing, a melody that itself soothes troubled spirits, to which the Gypto man responds by turning back into himself. we see a disgustingly heartwarming conversation between Pamela and her dad where she tells him that he was just having a bad dream this whole time. I read a statement on this game that said, Majora's Mask isn't bad, but it's my least favourite of the 3D Zeldas. The time system makes things inherently repetitive and tedious. You have to redo boss fights, redo side quests that you've already partly done, and if you take too long on a temple, you have to redo the entire thing. That's the point. Every time I play this game, I redo the same 3 side quests on my last cycle before saving the world and leaving Termina.
That's too damn bad! You keep digging!
I have to make sure that Romani doesn't get her mind wiped. Saving the world won't give her mind back once it's been asked by the aliens. I have to make sure that Lulu gets her eggs back. Stopping Majora and the moon will not convince the pirates to give Lulu her eggs back. And I have to make sure that Pamela gets her dad back. I honestly don't know if saving the world does help with this. It might do, but I'm not willing to take that risk at this point. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is repetitive. It is tedious. It's a game where you're the only person who doesn't need to accept their death, and it's a game where you watch everybody else try to evade their death or accept their death like it makes a difference. It's repetitive for everybody, especially you, and it's difficult for everybody, especially you. Just going back to that Pamela and her dad example, if you've ever lost someone close to you or watched somebody close to you lose themselves, or if you've ever known that it was coming, can you imagine witnessing that every 3 days until you have a chance to do something about it? I'm sure that I'm not alone in saying that I'd do anything to break that cycle. It's fairly obvious to me that both The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask and Dropping a Hand Dynasty Urn are dripping artistic intent, even though they are massively interpretable. But this does raise the question, are all interpretations valid? Or, excluding instances where the artist's intentional details are ignored or overlooked, are there any gleaned interpretations that are inherently invalid or incorrect? Part 2. Defending the undefendable. I need to bring out some emotions here that are bottled deep down way inside me for this, and I am definitely going to need to lie down later. Stephen Moffat has written some of the best episodes of British TV drama that have ever been written, which secured him a position of showrunner on a few shows that he used to confidently and calmly write some of the worst episodes of British TV drama that have ever been written. Moffat's work on Sherlock is a topic of discussion, but it's not my topic of discussion. I'd like to talk about some of his work on Doctor Who, and I'd like to keep it in a small scope if I can. Moffat has written some fantastic stuff for Doctor Who. He wrote The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, and he wrote Silence in the Library and The Forest of the Dead before he took over as showrunner, and then he had like a few seasons to ruin the show. Stephen Moffat's magnum opus is Blink, and that is not up for discussion. Full stop.
I'm feeling great!
Blink features the Weeping Angels, which work like this.
Welcome!
Where am I?
1969.
I can't.
Fascinating race, the Weeping Angels. The only psychopaths in the universe to kill you nicely. No mess, no fuss, they just zap you into the past and let you live to death. The rest of your life used up and blown away in the blink of an eye.
They're just statues.
Only when you see them. The lonely assassins, they used to be called. No one quite knows where they came from, but they're as old as the universe, or very nearly. And they have survived this long because they have the most perfect defense system ever evolved. They are quantum locked. They don't exist when they're being observed. The moment they are seen by any other living creature, they freeze into rock. No choice, it's a fact of their biology. In the sight of any living thing, they literally turn to stone. And you can't kill a stone. That's why they cover their eyes. They're not weeping. They can't risk looking at each other. Their greatest asset is their greatest curse. They can never be seen. Loneliest creatures in the universe.
Fairly simple. I actually have one gripe with this episode. I'll explain it for explaining's sake and then let it slide. Moffat actually picked this up later, even though the Doctor says,
Don't blink. Don't even blink. Blink and you're dead. They are fast, faster than you could believe. Don't turn your back. Don't look away, and don't blink.
when characters look at them, look away, and then look back, the statue moves a couple of inches. But when characters blink, the statues yeet LMFAO into the next fucking dimension. That might have even been on purpose now that I think about it. Other than that, I can't fault it. Not that I tried very hard. The best thing about the Weeping Angels is something that I don't think even Moffat realised that he did. They break the fourth wall in the most subtle way, and it skeeves me out to think about it. I'll show these clips that demonstrate this, see if you can figure it out. Okay, and now watch this clip.
Please insert the disc and prepare for departure.
Looks like a DVD player, there's a slot.
See, when the lights are on, the angels are statues, and when they're off, they move the TARDIS. This is clearly played off the comedy, but there is an interesting detail here that really makes me wonder. Nobody is watching these statues even though the lights are flickering. The characters are inside the TARDIS and the angels can't see each other because the TARDIS is between them. The statues at the moment because you, the viewer, can see them. I think that this is another thing that really ramps up the tension in this episode. This, to me, is what lifts Blink above and beyond any competition. You, as a viewer, have a part to play in this episode. You saved these characters. Okay, now watch this. Kinda fucking sucks all the tension out of it. Like, you can't help anymore, eh?
I think you had your chance.
You're done as a cameo character in the Doctor Who canon.
Dan, you're fired.
This is what we call a breakdown or a subversion of character integrity. I'm calling this a breakdown here because I don't think it was an intentional subversion, and even if it was, I don't think it was for the best. They're not stone when you look away. They stop being stone. We, the audience, can see the angels moving here and they're still stone. Just to confirm.
They are quantum locked. They don't exist when they're being observed. The moment they are seen by any other living creature, they freeze into rock. No choice, it's a fact of their biology.
The Weeping Angels feature in a few more episodes. They feature in Blink, The Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone, which shows the angels moving, and also that they're building an army even though they're known as
Lonely assassins, loneliest creatures in the universe.
Angels Take Manhattan. The Statue of Liberty is not even fucking stone.
I know the bullshit angel in Amy's eye in Flesh and Stone and the Time of Angels wasn't stone either, but I kinda wanted to hype up the Statue of Liberty thing because I think it's really funny. I'm not here to criticise the Weeping Angels any more than this. This to me is completely undefendable. So I'd like to try to defend it a little. If somebody shat on the floor and told me it were art, I would defend the artistic integrity of a literal turd. 1 million subscriber special, calling it now. I should have something more to say about these episodes than... Twat. I should have something more to say about these episodes than this is shit and it ruined the show. And while this is the opinion that I hold, I think there is more value in, instead of analysing the episodes themselves, analysing the implications and parallels of the episode when compared against Blink. There could be something more there. There could be an intentional parallel to the breakdown of the Doctor's character across Moffat seasons. There could be an intentional commentary on how latent capitalist values are destined to break down society if we as a species don't change course. That course being how we as consumers are willing to accept any kind of shit as long as it's from brands that we love or contains characters, premises, or themes that we want to see more of. Maybe more educated, funnier people can compare this decline to something more interesting than what I have to offer, but what I just said was the result of some real mental gymnastics. I actually think that Moffat just didn't reference Blink when he was writing the parts that I think are problematic. I think that the fourth wall breaking stuff wasn't intentional in the first place, and the statues didn't move in the scenes that I referenced because the episode that I mentioned was only contracted as a Dr. Light episode to cover for the short budget. I also think that Moffat made a few decisions to change the Weeping Angels for the plot, like the murder and the voice and the speed/image debate. I do think that the combination of these aspects did result in a character breakdown that perfectly foreshadowed the breakdown or degradation of the show in the future. I was originally going to use a few examples for this point, like the Lord of the Rings Eagles, but that's been spoken about enough, or the Final Fantasy VII remake. Was this game, with the fun parts excluded, intended to be as boring as it was, or was it a commentary on the mundanity of life and how media is the only thing that can make us feel new things? We can almost only experience new emotions vicariously at this point, and it's kind of sad that media struggles to make us feel anything with the way cookie-cutter theming is used in AAA film and game industries. Whether I reached it effectively or not, the conclusion I was aiming for here was to raise another question, which is unintentional nuance still valid? Part 3, Irrelevant Comparison and the Damage that this causes to my soul. Watch Dogs is one of my favourite games. Not because of Grand Theft Auto, I think Grand Theft Auto 5 has thoroughly overstayed its welcome at this point.
What? Would you open your fucking eyes?
Watch Dogs stood on its own 2 feet. It was an earnest attempt by the developers to do something different. It's gritty in the stupidest way, and as a result of that it has an incredibly quirky, if not completely hit and miss sense of humour.
I was hoping you could involve these guys in a gangland shooting of some sort. I got a few loose ends I need to tie up, and, you do owe me those favors.
I don't owe you anything.
Watch Dogs was about to completely break the mould, and I think it would have, but it was let down by Ubisoft, and it was let down by the fans, and it was let down by the critics, and it's sad. I'll dip my toes into some of the less constructive, yet somehow more popular criticisms of the game that I have witnessed.
We'll have the good stuff.
The graphics aren't like that original E3 demo trailer. It's a bad Grand Theft Auto clone, it takes itself too seriously, and the character generating AI is broken. It doesn't take itself seriously, get over yourself.
What? Bad boy, 17. What the fuck, man?
It's a funny game. While I admit the gameplay demo trailer, compared to the gameplay, was a bit of a letdown, I wouldn't blame the devs for this. Ubisoft and their marketing team absolutely pushed out a less than faithful render. I can look past that, and I think it's kind of silly if you can't for the sake of a game that was absolutely astounding at the time. I do have to say though, it is a really bad GTA clone.
Babe? Yeah? Come here? Come here? Press the circle button on my controller. Press it. Okay. No, I'm taking the back because I fucking stink. Get out. It's not even on.
Like, it's fucking awful. But cats are bad dog clones and apes are bad fish clones. I'll touch on this soon. The character generating AI was a new system at the time, and to criticise it as heavily as it's been criticised is a disservice to the industry, frankly. The AI wasn't perfect, but it worked. Watch Dogs has incredible stealth. It has an incredible AI system which does kind of still stand up to this day, especially if you look at Watch Dogs 2 and Watch Dogs Legion. And the gameplay is incredibly fun on the harder difficulties. And while I can say with confidence that Iraq may have easily been forgotten as a boss, Quinn, Damien and Default are extremely memorable encounters. Watch Dogs had a lot to say about the video game scene at the time. Watch Dogs 2 received similar criticism. A review that I watched by a reviewer that I really respect said it was almost better than GTA 5, but the forced stealth let it down. And if the NPCs are doing it, then I want to do it too. Talking about things like rollerblading and dancing and beatboxing and shit like that. If you want to do something you can't do in this game, play a different game, it's not that hard. Why would Aiden Pierce breakdance? He's a cold-blooded, calculated killer. He plays chess in coffee shops with strangers. And why would Marcus Holloway play chess? He's a youth, he commits egregious acts of vandalism. Grand Theft Auto 5 doesn't even let you rob banks that aren't in the story, and that's a fucking game about robbing banks. The comparison between these two games that only represent each other in looks and maybe 3 or 4 major mechanics has ruined the industry for open-world third-person action games set in modern ages. Saints Row, Watch Dogs, Driver, Sleeping Dogs, and assumedly all of the games that never got off the cutting room floor have been shot in the foot by this comparison to Grand Theft Auto. A comparison which is utterly unfounded. Watch Dogs Legion fell flat. It's where they almost lost me as a customer, but after some thought, I think if they bring another game out, I'll definitely give it a go. The play as anybody mechanic, which is currently as unpolished as the AI mechanic was in Watch Dogs 1, is harder to overlook though, because it's resulted in a frankly half-assed story. This is a game where you play as anybody, you can hack almost anything. Watch Dogs 2 was better. And you can recruit anybody in the street, and it's still being called a Grand Theft Auto quote. Just because you can shoot, drive, and get chased by the police. I've heard Cyberpunk 77 called a fucking Grand Theft Auto clone. It's ridiculous.
What are you, fucking gay?
Am I losing my mind? Trying to just enjoy art for what it is instead of making assumptions for what I think it's trying to be and enjoying the art less because it doesn't live up to those expectations is making me feel like a villain. Is what I'm saying less valid? Am I making sense? I'm not going to try and pass off a million bullshit commentaries on what I think the Watch Dogs series is about. Legion definitely fell flat, but I don't plan to go in depth about how the drop in story quality is probably a result of the implementation of a play-as-anybody system that painted the writers into a corner just to avoid a comparison to Grand Theft Auto, a game that it barely resembles. I'm not trying to comment on the quality of any of the art or video games that I've talked about here today, apart from Majora's Mask. That game is a fucking masterpiece and you should definitely play it. I'm trying to comment on uninformed consumerism, on how one man's trash is another man's treasure. Sometimes we just think about things the wrong way. On how even the rain reflects the sun, we can find value and patterns in bona fide nonsense, it's what we do as people. And on how eating shit every day will make chocolate seem like a bad attempt to replicate bum fudge. How ill-informed comparison can ruin the reputation of art and artists alike. Kojima Syndrome has existed for a long time, but it's only recently been given a name that seems to have caught on. While I disagree that Kojima Syndrome is a bad thing and think that we should seek out artistic merit wherever we can, I would love for an effective name to be given to the kind of person who consumes art but doesn't understand that it is art.
You know what I named these? My little Mortys.
That's flattering. Or that they miss the artistic intent through things like irrelevant comparison. Like a Philistine. Is ignoring nuance, intentional or not, the same as being bad at consuming art? I reckon so, yeah. Yeah.